America has a stake in China's success.
China is on a rising path, and America welcomes the emergence of a strong and peaceful and prosperous China.
The United States welcomes the rise of a prosperous, peaceful, and stable China.
All right, America's stake in China has withstood decades, but as more is revealed about the potential origin of COVID-19, should we be rethinking our relationship with Beijing?
Joining us now with his take from the Heritage Foundation is Dean Cheng. Sir, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
What do you think about that? Do we need to reevaluate our relationship with China? What are your thoughts this morning?
I think that part of the issue here is that the China of today is not the China that George W. Bush or George H.W. Bush talked about. It's a China that's much richer. It's a China that has more in the way of international responsibilities. But as we've seen with COVID-19, unfortunately, it's the same sort of China that continues to cover up information about things like global pandemics and its own human rights violations.
Yeah, their agenda sometimes can be really scary. We've heard stories about scientists that wanted to warn about this virus disappearing. Here's Senator Lindsey Graham talking about China.
If it were not for the irresponsibility of the Chinese Communist Party, there would be no pandemic in the world. Americans would be alive today and 22 million people would be at work. China's responsible. It's time to hold them responsible. They're the largest state sponsor of pandemics in the entire globe, and they need to pay a price.
You know, Dean, there's been a lot of building rage against this country for a number of reasons. Do you think this will force it to kind of spill over and get people to really pay attention?
Well, I certainly hope it gets people to pay attention, not just here, but everywhere around the world. The Chinese have a clear strategy for the future. Part of it is to build out the global 5G network. I expect them to tie pandemic aid to, hey, you should open up your markets to Huawei. I'm hoping countries won't fall for that.
And the U.S., you say needs to be focused on us right now because China's obviously focused on themselves and their recovery and getting out of this.
Absolutely. The United States is still the leading power. We need to be thinking about, for example, how do we want the WHO to look when it has to deal with the next pandemic, which may also come out of China? Do we want a leadership that can't even use the words Taiwan without becoming tongue-tied?
Yeah. Another complete embarrassment in all this has been the World Health Organization, which is heavily funded by the United States. And what exactly were they doing when all this was happening and when China was evidently lying? Let's take a look at a moment that was had at a news conference from February 24th. Okay, sorry, I'm going to read it out. Here's from a reporter. You obviously spoke to people in Wuhan, the doctors, the people on the front lines. What extent do you think cover-up and censorship played a role in allowing the virus to accelerate at the rate that it did? And you have Dr. Bruce Aylward of the WHO saying, whether other factors, as the one you mentioned, play a role, I don't know, frankly. Didn't look at that. I'm just being completely honest. It's almost as if the World Health Organization embraced just kind of taking a blind eye and trusting China implicitly, which is not a trustable nation. What do you think?
Absolutely. Dr. Aylward, as of February, already had other much better examples of countries that dealt with COVID-19 without being authoritarian. The best example is South Korea, but also Taiwan. And instead, he later, I believe, goes on to say that he would, if he came down with COVID-19, he would hope to be able to be treated in China. Sometimes you should be very careful what you wish for.
In your opinion, is the president taking the right approach with the World Health Organization?
I think that the optics of cutting off aid right now is very troubling, especially because we are in the middle of a pandemic. But, of course, it's also never a good time in the eyes of some to take an international organization to task. WHO's conduct and operations are deeply troubling. It has failed to halt this pandemic. Something needs to be done, and that includes getting everyone's attention, not just Americans.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Dean, thank you so much for your time. We do appreciate it from the Heritage Foundation.
Absolutely.
All right.